Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project designed to let me spend more time with interesting people than I would ever get on the radio show. I've introduced a few people over the years as needing no introduction, and I'm not saying that David Jason is the most worthy recipient of that description yet, but Sir David, you're probably in the top one.
Well, thank you. That's a nice way of putting it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We'll begin at the beginning, I think, but partly because the new book, this time next year, A Life of Positive Thinking, goes to places that perhaps even some of your most committed fans may not have visited with you before, but also because it struck me that you've lived. It's not just the career that has spanned an extraordinary period of British history, it's your life, and in some ways the years before your career started are at least as interesting as the years after your career got underway. So we begin in North London in 1940, sort of World War II in its full pomp.
That's right. I don't obviously remember too much of that, but my mother told me afterwards. And we were in North London, which is still quite a push for the Germans who were coming around bombing central London, but occasionally they would overstep the mark and we had bombs falling around us. And one of the things is imprinted on my mind that my mother told me, I would have been 4 or 5 years old, and we were in an Anderson shelter in the front room of our little house, and the bombs were falling. And I said to, apparently this, as I said, my mother told me, I said, got very nervous and frightened. And my mother said to me, don't worry, it's all right. It's only God moving his furniture about. Now, that may sound a bit silly,
No.
But at the time, when you're a little child, if you think, because we always referred that God was up there in the clouds, didn't we? And somehow it put my mind at rest, and I wasn't quite as frightened as perhaps I would have been. And any time I hear a thunderstorm and that now, I feel I'm quite at one with it.
Yes.
And it's because of my mother's great influence, or how clever she was to think of that line.
That's right. How did your mum end up in London?
Well, probably people know this, she was Welsh,
yes,
from the valleys in South Wales, and she spoke pure Welsh. And when she came to London, she'd got a job as like an au pair that you would call it nowadays, but she was then a home helper. How she got that first job, I don't know, because she would only be 17 or 18.
Gosh.
And in those days, to travel that far, I think she'd had such a bad time with her father that she sort of ran away from home, her and her sister. And so when she first came to London, she couldn't speak a word of English.
No.
So, and as she started to learn English, that was when she bumped into my father. And the story was that her and her sister, which is my aunt, were walking along the road, and my father with his mate, they said, "Hello, girls, where are you going? Do you want some company?" And they said, "Oh, go away," or whatever girls did in those days. And they persisted, and that's nature took its course eventually.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
Your dad was a porter at Billingsgate,
Yes, he was.
at the fish market.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a sort of proper salt-of-the-earth working class family background there.
Yes, yeah, it was. And I think that I would say, to answer that sort of question, it gave me a grounding, which I've got a feeling that a lot of kids today don't get the sort of grounding that I had. And what I meant by that was that my father said to me when I was about 12, 13, going on 14 to 15, he said, "You've got to get a job. You will get a job, because you've got to learn to earn your living." And that was normal. That was every kid, every stage in their lives, they would have been told they've got to go out and get a job. It doesn't matter what a job it was, because you've got to pay your way. So, and that has never left me. And one of the things I would just say about that hasn't left me is down the bottom of our main road, we lived off the main road, I used to go down and do some shopping for my mother, and being about 8, 9, 10, 11, something at that sort of age, I always remember it. It's always stayed with me, and it has been something that drives my wife and my daughter sometimes a bit crazy. Is that there was a huge sign in a poster on Finchley High Road, and what it was a giant tap, and coming from the tap was one drop, and what it said was, "Waste not, want not." And that's impressed me. I didn't understand what it meant when I was a kid.
No.
I couldn't work out, what does it mean? Why are you talking about one drop of water dropping? And then, of course, slowly, it sort of, you know, hit my brain. But it stayed with me. And I keep saying things like at home, I say, you know, we get that. You're not throwing that toast away, are you? Waste not, want not.
You carry your childhood with you.
Yeah.
But not everyone does. It's always interesting when you interview people how close to the surface the child is. And with you, especially for someone who's so well known for inhabiting characters, it's fascinating how close to the surface your inner child still is.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not really aware of it anymore.
No.
But one of the things, I came from a very poor secondary modern school, and it's not changed that much. I'm surprised to say that working class kids have this hierarchy. They still have. Why are we boys, basically, it was now transferred into the girls' department, such bullies? Why are we wanting to dominate? And you can see that in world history. It's 9 times out of 10, it's the men who cause the problems in the world. So that driving force does leave its mark on other kids. And I was quite small. I was very light, not very much weight.
Yes.
And so I had to find a way to survive and not get beaten up and pushed around all the time. So what I did was I managed to use my voice. And I had a teacher who was quite tough, and Mr. Winter was his name. And I could do a good impersonation of Mr. Winter. So what I used to do is when some of the boys you had to be careful of and avoid, if you like, I used to get with them. And in our school, we had a big shelter place where they parked their bikes and God knows what. And I used to come out with these lads and see the other lads all climbing on ladders and one thing. And I used to be able to go, "Hey, you boy, get off that ladder, come here." And they'd all freeze and go, "Oh," and of course, everybody would, us little team who'd done it, me, fall about laughing. Got ya. That used to help me with, stop me from getting roughed up, if you like. And so I suppose that's gave me the confidence that by doing things like using your voice to impersonate other people would give you an advantage and stop you getting beaten up, if you like.
And discovering the joy of making people laugh as well.
Yes, yeah, that as well, because it was twofold. One, it frightened the boys who were misbehaving, but the boys who weren't would fall about laughing because they thought it was really funny. So, yeah.
You said once that we didn't have a fridge. I thought that was a great line. But we never aspired to anything. You didn't in those days. What did that mean? Because, I mean, your older brother went to RADA, so they were clearly, Mum and Dad would encourage dreams, I think, albeit that Dad was very conscious that you needed to earn a crust. What did you mean when you said you didn't aspire to anything? Did it mean you knew your place, or you kind of...
No, I think that what that meant was once my brother had started with won a scholarship, if you like, to go to drama school.
Right.
It still cost my mother and father finances to keep him in school because that qualification, the money that he'd got from the government or council or wherever it was, wasn't nearly enough to support him because he had to travel from North Finchley to drama school in central London. So when it came to my turn, and I was invited to perhaps offer my services at drama school, a counsellor at the incognito area, Frown Barnet, had seen my work over a year or two and had offered to put in front of me, if I applied for a grant, I could get a grant and
Say no more.
you would go to get into drama school.
Right.
I told that to my parents, and my father nearly strangled me, I think, and said, if you did that, you would have to leave home and you'd have to be on your own. So that crushed a dream that was just starting in me, because at that time I was doing quite well in amateur theatre. So that was snuffed out instantly at birth, more or less.
Got it.
And so I thought, no, you can't. You're not allowed. You mustn't think that way. It's too grand.
You have to pay your way, and
Yes.
and you have to kind of get on with getting on with it.
Yeah.
It's quite poignant, that, isn't it? Given that, given what happened, because I mean, you did a few jobs. This is at the Muswell Hill Players, I think, where you got your.
No, it was
that
Frown
later?
Barnet,
So-
incognito theatre.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
this is where you first got the taste of making grown-ups laugh, as well as
Yes.
fellow children.
Yeah.
And going, what is that for people who don't know, for people who don't get it? What is that thing that happens to you when you walk onto a stage and you feel the eyes of the whole room on you?
This is a thing that develops over the years that you're doing it, and it's a very interesting question, because when you're rehearsing, you rehearse the play that you're doing, and you learn the lines and you learn the moves with your fellow actors, and then there comes the first night and you're like that. Because you're in front of an audience for the first time. And that is pretty nerve-wracking, because you've got to remember the lines, the moves. If you're doing a farce, which I did an awful lot of, or pantomime and those, and the audience they laugh at you, but they're not really in your mind, they're not laughing at you, they're laughing with you, because you've created the ability to make them laugh, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
So when that first happens, that's such a joy. It's it's a big turn on. And when you've been doing a part like I played in No Sex We're British, and I was in the West End for 18 months, and every night I'd be playing this character. And on Saturdays, Friday and Saturday, you had to practically get a whip out to keep them under control, because
Rowdy.
well, the people were out for enjoying themselves, because it was the weekend.
Yes.
And what you had to do, you had to learn how to control the audience, meaning if you let them laugh at everything too soon, too boisterously, too big, you get halfway through the second act and they were exhausted. They'd be going, oh dear, it's such fun, I can't laugh anymore, I'm out. So you'd lose the end of the show.
Like
the
momentum would peter out.
So you had to control them, meaning, for example, if it was raining, very wet and rainy, now you had to slow the audience down, because this is experience talking, because the audience are coming and they're wet and they're going, oh, excuse me, is it, no, I'll take this coat off, I'll take the coat, I'll take yours and put it over there. Well, I've got nowhere to put it on your lap. Oh dear, that's awful. I'm sorry. Right, where are we? What's happening? So you have to go,
Give them time to catch up.
Yes, absolutely. But that's something, a skill that you learn, right? I'm going to say this quite slowly. And because you're coughing, right? They haven't got any of those lines. So, sorry, what I was saying was, and I repeat the lines.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, you're that conscious of it
Yes.
then. So that's an extraordinary relationship. So I'm always struck with actors, especially the best actors, by where the craft starts and the art finishes and vice versa. Because what you're describing now is the craft of it, not the art of it, the alchemy, the magic that happens, which you can't teach. But the craft you can learn and you can teach.
Yeah. And that, to me, was the most enjoyable process. I used to love that. I would love, because I spent that much time in the West End in this play, I could afford to play with the audience, if you like, because I learned the skills of you can't do that if you're all nice, warm, sunny evening and you're out, you're having a good time, and you're gonna, this is a funny play, and you can't help but laugh. You're going to exhaust the audience. So what you have to do is you walk over the laugh lines. In other words, when you get to the taglines or the bits that are funny, then, if you like, you don't allow the audience to laugh too much. So you if you said, nice day outside, isn't it? And that's the sort of end, that's the laugh line. You would then go, it's a nice day outside, isn't it? And and they would go, sorry, what did you say?
Got it.
And then you would repeat that line, or somehow you'd slow it down. Whatever you would do, you have to give them the information so everybody hears it, because those lines, words, are going to come useful later on, because that's important lines that you sow now, and later in the play you return the audience, you go, oh yes, they say, that's right, he said that at the beginning, Act 1. So they've got to hear it.
And you give them the sense of being in on the joke when you do that, which is that magical intimacy that you have sometimes in the theatre. I'm going to jump ahead a bit because I'm interested in what the televisual or the filming equivalent is of that, because you don't have that energy. Of course you do with a studio audience, but you don't have, when you're playing Pop Larkin, you don't have the energy of an audience, even though in some ways you're trying to scale the same heights of intimacy, of connection with the audience.
Yes, you are right. You are. But then that becomes, because of the years that I've played theatre and I've worked with an audience, and every night that you go out and you do the play, and then sometimes you'd go, I don't know, there seems to be they're not laughing very much. There's too much of a gap between that laugh and that laugh. There's got to be something I've got to find something in the middle. So then it would be my job to find something. I would invent a piece of business, and then I'd hone that. That wasn't right. The next night, that still wasn't right. Then, now it's beginning to work. So what I've got to do with that? So all of those elements would then fill that gap that, in my mind, that's lacking in the audience or the show, the play. So to have a nice waves like that of laughter, down information, listen, laughter again, lovely. So it's like a seaside, like a sea that you learn. Again, it's learning, but I spent years in the theatre honing those skills, learning from the audience, not anything that I was doing. The
dream is to make it look effortless, whereas in fact there's decades of effort involved in getting in putting it together.
But that's the fun of it. That was the joy of every night going out, because you might be in Hull, you might be in Aberdeen, you could be in Weston-super-Mare, which I spent quite a lot of my time in farces there. So, yeah.
That's quite an intellectual analysis of the business, and you're a very erudite man. It comes across in all of your books, but in This Time Next Year, obviously most recently. So you're, I would say, intellectual and erudite, but not actually in the formal sense that well educated, because you left school very young, and as we've established, you had little choice but to go out and start earning a crust straight away. I read something quite poignant, David, about when the television sketch show that you did with Michael Palin and Terry Jones and they went off to do Monty Python, and you'd been conscious of not having been to drama school and not having been to university, and then it was the second time that a sort of spaceship took off that you'd been on, but you weren't on it when it went into orbit. How conscious have you been sort of throughout your life of the path not taken, of where you could perhaps have indulged some of your more intellectual enthusiasms?
Well, that's a very interesting way that you put it. Yes, I've never quite heard it put that quite like that. But yes, of course you're right. That when they went off, my guys in We Have Ways of Making You Laugh.
Yes.
I think it was the title that we had in our first children's television series with those guys. They went off to enjoy pastures new because they felt restricted, that they weren't allowed to be as exploratory, if that's the right word, in the children's television that they were working in. They wanted to expand their horizons. And to cut a long story short, they did. They didn't do the next series, which would have been series 3 or 4 of Do Not Adjust Yourself. That they went off and became Monty Python's Flying Circus, which had left me and Denise Coffey still wallowing around in children's television and not wallowing very far. But they became huge, as you probably know. Well, that was it was one of those where you go, oh dear, we could have been in that. That could have been us. Could have been sharing that limelight. Could have been enjoying that glow of popularity, of making a lot more people laugh, etc., etc. And it didn't happen. And the second time that happened was when I got the part in Dad's Army.
This is the next year. I think 67 for Do Not Adjust Yourself, and then 68 for Dad's Army. Or not, as the case may be.
Yeah, you're right. But what's the expression is, when you're knocked down, you've got to get back up, dust yourself down and carry on.
Which is why the subtitle of the new book is A Life of Positive Thinking, which for some people going through the bookshelves in Waterstones, they might think, what's he on about now? But actually, it really is a very accurate sort of sobriquet or very accurate description of what you've done. And I'm going to jump back again now, because you didn't go into acting. As you say, your dad perhaps had his fingers burnt with your older brother's experiences, and you needed to go out and get a job. The first job you got, was that the electrician, or was that the second job? What was
my first job was in a garage, lying under cars.
15 years old, car mechanic.
Well, of training car mechanic. Lying under the car.
But you do like fiddling with things. I mean, you do like fiddling with things and play. We've got your workshop. We've seen some of the TV that you've done latterly has indulged that enthusiasm. And do you know, when you were talking about getting the audience to eat out of the palm of your hand then by just tweaking a line or finding a little business, I thought you sounded like you were rummaging around under the bonnet of a play there rather than...
Yes. No. One of the things that I remember... There's so many, but it's searching. And I did a wonderful play. It's one of the longest parts in the British theatre, was the Norman Conquests. It's a play called... It's three-act plays.
Crikey.
And you have to learn all three, because what we did was we did Monday, Tuesday, play 1, Wednesday, Thursday, play 2, Friday, Saturday, play 3, right? So you had to...
You've got to have them all there, all the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
My God. But it was the pleasure, the joy of doing it. And one of the things I remember, I'll just tell you this quickly, and this thing about invention, about creation, about what you're doing, that the character that I played, without going into the big... How it all interplays, all three plays are interconnected. And one of the things was that the character that I played was Norman, of the Norman Conquerors, and he was really getting very, very merry, and he'd had a good old swing. The reason why is because he was staying the weekend with his family, his wife, his ex-wife, his friend's wife, and tiddly and fart, right? And he in the plays, he chatted up each individual female and had made a date with them over the evening. Like at 9 o'clock, I'll come to your room. And at 11 o'clock, he was going to come to his sister-in-law's room. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, he was going to come to thing me. And during the course of this, he was getting, how's your father, a bit drunk. And there's a song that goes through it, is girls were made to love and kiss, who am I to interfere with this? It was that one. But what he did was, he put this record on in an old-fashioned wind-up one, and he was a bit worse for wear, let's put it that way. And he used to put the record on, put the stylus on, and then it would go... Girls were made to love and kiss, you know, and then he would sing along to it, right? Well, what happened was that one night I was pretending, obviously acting that was in my cups, and I thought, I wonder what would happen if I'm trying to get this record on and I start the record first. So I won't put it on. I'll do it the other way round. So I started up the record, the player, going round and round like that. Then I tried to put the LP, which was old plastic ones in those days, onto the player. Well, I couldn't do it because I couldn't get the hole to fit in the thing, if you remember. So I'd be going, I can't find the hole, it won't go on. So then one night I just went, and he
Brought the house down.
brought the house down.
Yeah.
I was enjoying myself,
Yes.
right? And what happened, the audience were loving the character out there. And because they liked me being, he's a character, isn't he? And he's had too much to drink. You can tell he's had too much to drink. All of those elements have to be there before you could do something like I just described.
Got it.
So because we're now in a position with the audience, he's on the stage on his own. He's enjoying the drink that he has imbibed. Very nice, thank you very much. And he's going to play this record, right? So how can I turn this for more pleasure for them?
Yes.
They're important people, they are. I'm not. They are. So
And you can feel their pleasure. And
Yes.
that's the magic of it,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
You can feel it.
So you learn all of those. So when it comes to television, I've got all of those, loads of that in my back pocket.
I love that. And I noticed when you're talking about Norman, you talk about the characters that have meant the most to you over the years as if you know them. You talk about them as if they're real people. You write about Scullion from the Porterhouse Blue. You write about Del Boy, obviously. You write about these characters as if you know them, as if they're people that you know. And that's how you just talked about Norman then.
You're right. I hadn't thought of it like that. But of course you're right. And the joy of that is the joy that I try to transmit, that I've learned to transmit from the stage to the audience. And what that sort of means is that when you talk about Scullion, who was this guy who I worked out used to be in the army, and he's now in charge of an office, entry office in a university college. And I learned that he'd be a bit abrupt because he was ex-military, and he'd be a bit precise because they always are, the military people, was they learn. You will say yes, no, sir, and all of that. So that would be ingrained in him now. So that's the stuff that I use. I enjoy the idea of creating this man who used to be a military man. There are all those elements. For me, is half the pleasure of acting the character, becoming the character.
And the more work you do in that space, the more authentic the character becomes.
Exactly. And that was, again, gives you more and more pleasure because me and the audience are working together, that I am that character now. I'm not an actor. I'm not David Jason.
No.
I'm, Scullion, if you like, or I'm Derek Trotter, or I'm Paul Larkin.
Yes. You were a young James Cagney in one of your earliest reviews.
Yes, you're right.
by now you had the ambition.
Yeah.
It didn't quite. I just want to know how the planets finally aligned, because the world was denied BW Installations and Co. for I think just 5 or 6 years. You and your friend Bob ran your own electrical business after you decided you didn't want to spend the rest of your life underneath a car, but you realised pretty quickly you didn't want to spend the rest of your life doing electrical installations either. So what was the catalyst? How did you make the break? How did you move across from a normal job into the dream, as it were?
Well, around this time, I had tried writing letters. I'd got a copy of The Stage, which anybody who's trying to get into the theatre, especially in those days, you got a copy of a magazine called, a paper called The Stage. And inside The Stage, on the back page, was the sort of wanted columns, if you like, of people who were, sorry, it makes me smile now, who were looking for actors or writers or performers or whatever to join them. And so you used to put an advert in the back, and there was dozens of these things. And so you used to write off to them, I used to write off, and get 9 times out of 10 no reply. And then sometimes I would get a reply, and sometimes I would go to an audition and fail miserably. But mostly it got me nowhere.
Right.
Nowhere.
Okay.
And then one day, and this is the way fortune, I was going to say fortune favours the brave, that sort of expression. But it wasn't that. Is that I suppose you could say the planets line up and just about sometimes come together and gives you that first leap forward. And what it was, that I was doing an amateur play at the time called Tea House of the August Moon, which was they made a lovely film of. And my brother had a good friend called Simon Oates, who was an actor, director, producer, sort of jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Anyway, my brother came to see me in Tea House of the August Moon. And my brother's friend, Simon Oates was his name, came and saw me after, and we had a beer in the pub. And he said, I understand you are trying to get into showbiz. What have you been doing? I told him about these endless letters that I wrote and got nowhere. And he said, oh, all right, okay. Well, are you keen to become a professional? I said, oh, give him a right arm. Anyway, a couple of 3 weeks later, the telephone rang at my house. Yeah, the telephone those days. And it was Simon. And he said, are you still interested in wanting to become an actor? And I said, yeah. He said, well, be at Bromley Rep next Monday morning for a read-through in a play called South Sea Bubble. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, coward.
Yeah. So off I went. And now the turning point in this was Simon was he was a lovely character. He was a lovely man. But he had this wicked sense of humour. And he would amuse himself, and so much he would laugh himself, and he would go into tears virtually of something that he invented. And what he did, he invented some bits of business for me to do. And the one bit I remember was that he said to me, and it was the way that you do these things. And I was in this play in an open air in the South Seas, and I was playing this butler, Sanyamo, and there was a set of drums that they used, and I was playing this character, and I started to, I'd love to play that, like this, and there was about 8 actors on the stage, and what happened was I was miming that, I'd love to play this, and suddenly I missed, and I went boom on the drums, and all of the actors turned like that and looked at me, and I was this poor little butler, and I started to do a funny little bit of business like that, And the audience loved it, right? Well, Simon, the director, was his bit of business, not mine. But it was the way that I did it, I think, that then gave me a few more bits of business. But the long and the short of that story was, because of what I'd done, that it put me in such a position that the managing director of the theatre in Bromley offered me a year's contract to play all the little parts for a year.
And you bit his arm off?
Yes.
There was never any doubt in your mind that this
way.
was what you wanted.
No.
How did your dad take the news?
Well, by that time, I'd earned enough. I was paying my way.
Okay.
And so because I could pay my way, in other words, I was earning a wage from the theatre, I could pay my mother a living wage. Yes. So it didn't bother my father very much. But what happened was when I left the theatre that year and then you couldn't get any jobs, I went back to being an electrician for a while.
That must have been tough. Did you feel you'd had your one bite of the cherry, or did the positive thinking kick in?
No.
Positive thinking kicked in.
It's I'm on it now, love. I'm up and running.
Yeah, I've had a taste.
I've got something that I can prove to people. I spent a year in Bromley Rep. Yes. I have qualifications.
Yes, and because of that energy you feel in a room when you do what you call your business, you know that you've got something not every actor has.
Well,
you need to hold on to that, David, surely, otherwise you'd give up.
I think you're right. Of course you're right. That you've got to hang on to something, because when you get kicked back, which was the two major jobs that I lost, like that one in Dad's Army, it knocked you right on the floor, because that was going to be a television series. And who knows where that would have ended up. Well, we all know where Dad's Army ended up. But that would have put me on the map, as I thought, but it wasn't to be.
Well, no, who knows where you would have ended.
No, exactly.
Because it might feel like a missed opportunity, but, as we've said, sometimes it's all about where the planets end up, isn't it? So obviously that period of unemployment, although tricky, was not long enough for you to consider knocking it on the head. Then you start playing a variety of roles. You're David Jason, of course, by now, because there was already a David White registered with Equity. I think it was Humphrey Barclay that saw you in
end of the pier in Bournemouth.
At the end of the pier in Bournemouth, which is how you ended up doing Do Not Adjust Your Set on ITV.
Yeah.
We've done that hideous double of 67 and 68, where two hugely successful television shows had you involved in their embryonic stages, and then didn't have you involved in when they went ballistic. But you never sort of lost. You never lost hope, but what you did do is have a slower rise through the next few years, from the sort of late 60s onwards. And I think I understand something now that I've met you that I didn't understand before we sat down. When you read about actors doing radio or actors doing stuff not immediately prestigious, and you think, oh, was he slumming it, or was he? But you would have loved that just as much as you loved everything else, because you were there building characters again, whether you're doing Weekending or whether you're doing The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It doesn't really matter what the stage is, because for you, the big thing has always been creating that character on that stage.
Yeah, the work. It's the work ethic.
It's always the work.
Yeah, and I loved it. So I didn't care what I did.
Yes.
As long as I was working, as long as I was doing acting and being somebody else and creating somebody else. That was most important to me. So I just sort of grabbed at virtually everything. But in those days, I was sort of one of the kingpins of the voiceover department. So I was doing, week after week, I was doing a voice here, a voice there, commercial here, commercial there. One of the ones that I remember, because it was in Vision, which it was very few that I did that in Vision, was mannequin cigars. And what it was, which I really loved, I'm not sure whether I put it in the book or not, because it sort of appeared in my, it really appeared, I would have done it anyway, but what it was I was a character in this commercial, this small commercial, and it was in a hospital, a small room in a hospital, and the character was lying in the bed, was lying like this. He was completely covered in bandages, and his hand was in plaster of Paris hands, held out like this as a cup sort of thing. And I was a character trying to sell mannequin cigars. So I was sitting alongside this guy, puffing away at my mannequin cigar. And because he'd got his hand out like that, I used it as an ashtray. So we puffed, yeah, anyway, I always had smoked mannequins. They're, and then I think possibly right at the end of the commercial was a 30-second commercial. I stubbed it out in his hands. So, so that was things like that I used to do,
and derive satisfaction from them, derive fulfilment from them. But there's two ambitions, isn't there? There's the ambition to earn a living, and then there is inevitably the ambition to turn it up a few notches, and to achieve the recognition that by now I think you probably felt that you were beginning to deserve.
Yes. What it was, and there is a difference here, that I wasn't driven by being famous. I was driven by being more successful.
Yes.
I wanted to be better than I was in everything that I did. And so, in a way, that you're quite right, I needed to push on. And I suppose what was hiding the fame was the one to be more successful. And so what does that mean, more successful? It means, I think it means being recognised by your peers, by people who I considered posh actors who had been to drama school. And because I hadn't, that always put me feeling a little bit below par. And one of the things I always had a lust for, and it still itches my palate, if you like, was I had this dream of appearing in the National Theatre as a National Theatre player.
Yes.
It was because of the prestige. It was the highest achievement you could get as an actor, to play in those big, wonderful productions at the National Theatre, and it never came my way, but
you've done all right.
Yeah, I've done all right. I'm not worried.
And actually, I wonder if it's not just that, the respect of your peers. It's also the size of the audience. So you don't want to be famous, but given that you love so much that relationship, that creation of the bond, that you say you couldn't have got that laugh in Act 3 if you hadn't done that work in Act 1 to establish, and therefore surely the bigger the audience, the bigger the buzz.
Yeah, of course, you're right. You've got to be, the difference between it's so difficult to explain, that you play, say, to anywhere between 200 and 600 people during the week, maybe more. Come the weekend, which was Friday and Saturday, 2 shows on Saturday, and this one is particularly, No Sex Please of British, and it's packed, and you're talking about 12 to 1,500 people all sitting there. Well, the weight of that laugh when it comes out of the auditorium, it can knock your socks off, or it blows your hair straight.
I can imagine.
It's such a joy, it's such a pleasure. And then when that particular play, because you've brought so much pleasure to the audience being so silly, basically having a laugh yourself, that you get sometimes a standing ovation, which that is incredible, excitement, a buzz, and that is a cherry on the cake. And if you could get that every night, that pleasure that you get from a live audience.
We're sort of motoring through the early 70s, heading towards the mid-70s. The regard of peers, the regard of colleagues is probably the point to bring the late, great Ronnie Barker into the conversation, isn't it? Because you'd done, and by now you might have been, correct me if I'm wrong, if I saw you on a bus, I'd think, I know that fella, he's been in. So I wouldn't necessarily be able to place precisely what it was I'd seen you in, but you'd popped up in Porridge, you'd popped up in other shows, you'd been on Harcourt Barker, His Lordship Entertains in the late 60s. And then in 76, I presume he had quite a big say in who was going to get the role of Granville in Open All Hours. And this is when things start going bonkers for you.
Yeah. It starts to... I start to get recognised because I'm in, it's like a bit of a double act, me and Ronnie Barker, and everybody loved Ronnie Barker, and I was just his sidekick, but I was being noted along with Ronnie B. And so because of the other thing about that, which is interesting, that I'm not sure that it would work today, but Ronnie had this character that had a stutter that he could do so well, and he could make it comic. And one of the things I would say about that's why I'm saying I'm not sure you could get away with it today, and get away with it is the wrong word.
But it was affectionate.
Yes.
There was no exploitation involved.
No. The interesting thing about that was Ronnie received more than one. I read at least 2 or 3 letters from people who said thank you for bringing it to the public attention that us people who stutter can't help it and whatever. And they thanked Ronnie for highlighting it in a way that they were ordinary people, but they just had this stutter. So
I find that very easy to believe because there was nothing remotely snide to it or anything like that. And it's a very good example of what you've been talking about with regards to doing business, to creating things that aren't actually, they're not in the script in the sense of here is a line of words, here are 4 sentences that will bring the house down. He's doing something beyond that. He's doing something subtler. He's putting a record on a spinning turntable. He's doing something that you can't really quantify. You can't, and it works beautifully. And you become a household name. You become pretty much overnight, because it wasn't like Only Fools and Horses, was it? Open All Hours was a hit immediately.
You're right, because of Ronnie's stature.
And also because it was brilliant. I mean, and for people my age, one of the first things that I remember watching where I would laugh at, sometimes I'd laugh at the bits my dad laughed at, and that made me feel so grown up that I understood. I understood the comedy as well. But what I didn't know was that there was a 5-year gap between the 2 series, and you did more voiceover work, lots of children's TV, and then just as if I've got this right, Open All Hours comes back for the 2nd series, just as you've been cast in your next, as roughly only. So they're going out more or less at the same time.
Yes, you're right. It was just.
Well, this you must have felt like King Kong at this point in your career.
Yes. You're right. It was a wonderful position to be in that I couldn't turn down. Returning to Granville,
of course,
because it was with Ronnie, and even though I think it was Only Fools and Horses that I think that I was running at the same time, and it was just beginning to get off the ground.
Yes,
and I suppose in a way you could have said, "Oh, sorry, I can't do Open All Hours. That's already. I'm doing my own.
I'm top of the bill now.
I'm top of the bill. Yes. I just love the work.
Yeah, of course.
And also the work with the governor, as I called him.
Very generous man.
Yeah, he was.
Professionally generous, which is not a guarantee in your line of work, is it?
No, there's more than one occasion that you...
Yes, people have been less than
Yeah.
giving.
Yeah.
So, and then the other bit about this that I love is the fact that Only Fools and Horses, you name, in fact, the BBC commissioner, don't you, who kind of took the view to go with his gut rather than with his head. So he's got the figures in front of him. He's got the figures for Only Fools and Horses, the viewing figures. Then he's got the script for Series 3, was it? And he's sort of thinking the viewing figures don't necessarily justify the decision. So he says, my head is with the figures and my gut is with the script. And I think you've been toasting this man's gut ever since, haven't you?
Yes, you're right. You're right. That his... It was because they repeated.
Yeah, because of a strike, I think. I mean, again, it's serendipity, isn't it, kicking in? You can never overestimate the importance of however much positive thinking you've got. You need a little bit of luck as well sometimes.
Absolutely. So, you're right. with that, again, it's one of those, if only you were there at that time, you would have got that part,
Yes.
or
Yes.
because you weren't, or because you were, and God, there's so much luck in this business.
And if you can remember that, I think you can always keep your feet on the ground.
Well, I think that's the most important thing. But with what's it called? This celebrity instant fame,
Yes.
which you get on those shows where everybody takes their clothes off and walks around, looking very beautiful. The section of those people who become, I would say, very popular or well known or famous, even.
Yes.
They haven't got any of the background of actually working and enjoying the process. They're famous for being famous.
They've got no bottom. And now we've reached the bit where everybody knows a lot of what happened next professionally. Everybody knows that Del Boy, who I think you drew on a character that you'd met when you were working on the Electrics, didn't you? When you were a Sparky. Yeah, I think you named him on Desert Island Discs.
Derek
Hockley.
Yeah.
So you've got that. It's still there, filing something away 30, 20 years previously.
Yes.
But now you are one of the biggest stars in the country. Certainly some of this period, probably the biggest star in the country. Did it live up to your expectations? Did you enjoy it as much as you seemed to, or as much as you had imagined that you would?
Well, I'm glad you said that's very flattering of you, being so famous. I think.
Well, you've got the awards, I think, to prove it. It's not just me, is it? You must have about 8 mantelpieces at home.
It's true. Yes. Please, I don't want to publicise my 36 awards, if you like. No, it's most important is being able to keep your feet on the ground,
yes.
Which is from all of those journey that I've travelled to achieve such success that I'm very proud of in a way. But because of the way that journey revealed itself, it's made me keep my feet on the ground. In other words, that I don't believe all of this, I've got a knighthood, but what that does, it doesn't make me feel that I'm, special. And
yes.
I think you ought to get down on one knee when you speak to me because I am a sir, No, I hardly ever use that title, though I have won it and I am genuine to use it. So what I'm sort of saying is I'm trying to let the success be with me, but not change me then.
And what it does change is your choices. So you now move into an era where you can pick and choose, to the point where you get given 5 detective novels to read and essentially a kind of invitation to pick the one that you want to play. I thought that was an incredible story. And you picked Jack Frost.
Yeah, you're right. I'd forgotten that. No, I'd forgotten how that came about.
I want to know what the other 4 were, and whether or not they're still looking for a film deal,
Yeah, you're right. I wish I could.
But so that's what you relish. You don't. I mean, obviously, recognition is lovely, awards are lovely, but what you love is the fact that you get to play these parts that are a million miles away from the ones that have given you your first flush of fame, but also in their own ways profoundly nuanced. Fascinating. Pop Larkin probably. I often think that Pop Larkin, because again, that was a show we'd watch as a family, that with a 25, 30-year age gap between me and my parents, that we would love it equally. Probably, one of my all-time favourite television shows. I'd read the books at prep school. I'd read the H.E. Bates books, which was quite rare before that TV show came back around. You have this wonderful run now of doing whatever you want to do, and everything you touch turned to gold. Didn't it?
Not really. Yeah, I know what you mean. Not everything.
Well, give or take.
Yeah, we did Micawber, which was written by John Sullivan.
Yes.
And so you put that together and you think, well, there's got to be a winner. But it would have been much more successful than it was. And the reason being that the man who ran the company at the time decided to put Micawber out at different times to try and encourage an audience, a viewing audience, because I was winning such big audiences for Fools and Horses. And that's the way that he thought on it, because I had it out with him. That's how I know. And he did apologise eventually, but it was, you need to nurse a new situation comedy, and that doesn't always work. But because he wouldn't nurse it, he didn't nurse it. In other words, Friday night, let's say, or it doesn't matter what night,
Sure.
7 o'clock.
Appointment. You need an appointment.
Yes.
You need to know what you're getting and when.
Exactly. Yeah. So the audience would go. They used to call it the what's it called? The drink counter, the water.
Oh yeah,
the water butt.
Yeah, the kettle, the water cooler.
The water
cooler moment.
That's it.
Where you all gather around and talk about it the next day.
That's it.
You need that.
Yeah, they use that as the expression, whether mainly being, what did you watch last night?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, I watched. Oh yeah, I didn't fancy it. Oh, you may say it's quite good.
Exactly.
Really?
It,
well,
yeah.
well, no, the good. I'm watching it next.
If you'd all watched it on a different day, you're not going to talk about it. Not going to talk about it at work the following morning. And the other bit that I found fascinating as a sort of student of the era was this weird thing they did where they'd make pilots of 5 or 6 different shows and put them all out as one-offs and see which ones cut the mustard. And I mean, it reads like, a lot of the book reads like a who's who of the big stars of that era. But everyone is essentially trying to get their noses into the same trough, aren't they?
Yes. I wish you wouldn't put it that way. But you're right. Yeah. And Ronnie Barker did that with The Odd Job, which I was in, Porridge, and...
it's hard to believe now. Amazing that you get that, because I suppose there's quite a lot of outlay on getting a pilot made, whereas now it'd be a lot harder. And then you come back. You come back to Doncaster, which must have been... to do the Still Open all hours, which must have been a very special symmetry for you.
Yeah, it was, because I was headhunted by the head of comedy at that time, who took me out for lunch, and he said, "Is there anything that you'd like to do?" And we talked about a number of things, and I said, "To tell you what, one of the things that always intrigued me was what happened to Granville after Open All Hours." So he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, he was so put upon in the business. He was so trained by Ronnie Barker's character that what did he leave the shop? Did he go somewhere? Where did he go? Why? And all that." And he said, "That's interesting." He said, "I never thought. I think I'll talk to the writer and see what he says." And so what the writer came back and said, "Well, I'd be more than happy to write that Granville takes over the shop and becomes Arkwright." So I said, we just sort of said, yeah, that's probably what he would have done. Yes, so he becomes a sort of cardboard copy of the original. And I said that would be a lovely idea, because he'd taken on the persona and carried on the tradition and been as mean and as, as all get out, as Ronnie's character always was. So in a way, it was tipping my hat to Ronnie again. And
it was lovely.
Yeah.
And also brilliant in its own right. But it has that lovely kind of background to it, that foundation that again there's 2 things there that have popped up throughout this conversation. You're bringing the audience into something that feels very special to them, particularly if they watched it the first time round. There's almost a callback element to it. And the second thing is the way you just spoke about Granville there, about wondering what had happened to him, like he was a real person that you cared about and wondered about in all of the years that you weren't inhabiting his brown coat.
Yeah, it's funny, yeah. I never looked at it like that.
They're real people to you, all of the big characters that you've played.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. It never occurs to me that they're not, really. No. But, you're very perceptive, if I may say.
Well, and we're nearly out of time, so I should explain why we haven't dwelt unduly upon the character that I think most people recognise as being your most successful. It's because we don't need to. Everybody's got their own relationship with Del Boy. I was interested today in meeting David Jason, and it's been an absolute pleasure. I just want to add, for the purposes of the book, and 2 things really. There's a lot of love in your life. isn't there? You've had a lot of love in your life, which probably explains, again, why you've managed to stay so centered and so grounded. And partly because of that, when you write about the discovery of a daughter that you knew nothing about, and you write about it in a beautiful combination of wistfulness or romance and matter-of-factness, because that's how it is in your life. It's something amazing that's happened to you. You were deeply concerned about the impact that it might have on your other daughter, on Sophie. Your wife, Jill, has clearly been an incredible strength and presence throughout all of the periods that we've been talking about. And as a consequence of all of that, you've ended up with this lovely, unexpected little chapter in your life with a grandson thrown in for good measure as well. And you write about it. I'm adopted, so I'm always conscious of biology and nature and nurture. And you write about it quite beautifully.
Oh, well, that's very nice of you to recognise that. It was, when it first happened, you can imagine it was a serious shock.
Yes.
Because 30, 40 years had gone past without knowing this person. It's a total stranger. So it has taken, it still is, you're getting to know each other more and more. And what, as you say, with the grandson, funny enough, just to mention that, they came over a couple of weeks ago for Sunday, and he likes to play games, which we do. But suddenly, because I hadn't seen him for about six months-ish or whatever, so last time I saw him, he was like that, right? And now he's like my height.
Yeah.
Which
But he's not stopped.
I know that, and he's got long hair and everything, and I call him the Hare, Charlie the Hare, because I'm jealous, of course, of his hair. But this little tot is now like, talking more or less like that. And I still, where's he going? He's leaving me behind. I hate him. No, I don't, of course.
No, I
know. I couldn't get over the height that he'd suddenly changed. And so that's part of growing up. It's part of life and part of everything. But this new person, not only I've got this new daughter, I've got this giant coming.
Well, I think there's an openness that has run through all of your life and your career, an openness to new experiences, new opportunities, which makes the final pages of the book. There's a little, I don't know what the word that I'm looking for there is, but you think you've still got some miles on the clock, don't you? You would quite like some slightly more substantive offers to come in at this stage in your life and career.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm prepared to, savour the offer when it comes in. And
But I mean it. I mean, you would quite fancy another couple of big cracks of the whip.
Yeah, I'm just addicted to work.
Yes.
And some people get addicted to alcohol, some to stupid devils get addicted to drugs. And I'm addicted to, I suppose, an audience of people. I want to make people laugh and enjoy themselves, which gives a secret way of giving myself pleasure.
Speaking of secrets, final question, do you have any actual specific secret dreams? Is there anything where you think, do you know what I'd really love to do? I'd really love to do that.
I'm still waiting for Hollywood to call.
No, you're not taking my question seriously. Is there, or are you? I mean, would you quite like a kind of...
No, I know what you mean. No, there isn't really. As long as I can work, and one of the great things that I would like to do more of is making characters out of cartoons, I think.
Yeah.
That I do. I really enjoy that. And
we haven't mentioned Danger Mouse, have we? We've managed to get through the whole interview without looking at some of the things you did in that field, which again, utterly seminal.
Yeah,
and
DM,
we
used to call him, it's characters like that I think I really would like to play, because in my time of life it's not as easy to learn the lines as it used to be, but I can still invent the characters, and I enjoy that process. So if you're out there wanting to, employ a senior citizen, I'm with you.
This Time Next Year by David Jason, A Life of Positive Thinking is out now. So, David, thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And an eye-opener, I must say, that, good grief, I didn't know you asked me some questions. Even I didn't think about it.
Well, I'm glad I kept you interested.
You did. You did.
Thank you.